Hello, my name is Brad Lale. If you look in your program, it might say that my name is Grady Hunt, and that's not true. Grady was called away at the last minute, not able to be here, and I agreed to stand in for him. I am a NCDOT board member from Division 12. It's great to be here to welcome you guys. I think that as we were gathering before I started the session here, we were talking about what a powerful keynote address we heard this morning, and how important it is, how important it is sometimes to hear the real human story, right? I mean, I think we could look at data and talk about numbers and talk about clinical items, but to hear that story, even on I don't know about y'all, but even on the video when it was his parents were so emotional. I mean, it really got to me, and you could tell Solomon was so authentic and so driven to really work in this space. And it's a space that needs a lot of help. I mean, I think mental health, I'm certainly no expert, but I know that people, as he says, you wouldn't know that he was struggling or even his sister was struggling at times. They just looked like all of us, right? But there was a lot going on. And I've always liked that expression, and be kind, because everyone you meet is fighting a great battle. And I think that's so true. We've got some experts here to help us in this conversation, and we hope that it's some things that you can take away from it. So I'm going to introduce Amanda Olive, our Director of Human Resources at the NCDOT, and she'll take it from here.
So good afternoon. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Amanda Olive. I am the HR Director for DOT, and I am a long-term DOT employee. So the agency is very important to me, and the well-being of our employees is very important to me. And one of the things that we've noticed over the last couple years since COVID is that we really do have a lot of employees that have struggled and coming back to the workforce, coming back into the office, and just kind of handling different aspects of their life, not just their job, but everything impacts and affects each other, our personal life, our professional life. And we've had a lot of conversations as management at DOT for how should we handle this? How can we help our employees? How can we address these issues that we're facing? And as Brad mentioned, it's a very, very powerful topic, and it's a very difficult topic at times to talk to other people about. Because you don't know what other people are going through. And one of the things that we have done at DOT is we've decided to focus on mental health awareness. We are working on developing some mandatory training for all of our employees, and then some specific training for supervisors and managers to try to have these conversations with employees. As a result of that, this session kind of came about, and it just so happened that we had the awesome keynote speaker in Solomon that really tied it all together. So we have today 4 panelists from 4 different areas that have dealt with these situations and have experience with helping individuals through these difficult times. You're going to hear first from, we switched it up, sorry. You're going to hear first from Charles Russo. It was supposed to be Aaron Back. No, I'm just kidding. Which way are we going? Are we going to go? Okay. Aaron was trying to sell off his slot as the first presenter prior to the session, and it didn't go very well for him, obviously. So Aaron Back is a peer counselor or peer consultant at North Carolina Department of Public Safety, and he has worked in the law enforcement field for over 30 years. He's retired from the Highway Patrol and has a really unique perspective about the situation. So he's going to talk to you guys about that. Then we have Diane Scassetti, who is the Chief of Staff to the Governor of New Jersey. Prior to that, Diane oversaw the Department of Transportation, correct, Diane, for New Jersey. So she also has kind of 2 different perspectives with where she is now, but as a transportation administrator for many, many years and dealing with these types of situations. We have Peter You see, I already messed it up, Peter. Peter Tatishi. Peter is the Director of Strategy and Planning for the Division of Mental Health, Development Disabilities, and Substance Uses for, no wait, yes, Association of General Contractors. I went down, sorry. Charles is the Director of Strategy Planning for the Division of Mental Health, Development Disabilities, Substance Uses for DHHS in North Carolina. So they're gonna do some presentations for you guys with their experiences in these areas, and then we're gonna come back and do some questions and answers with them. So, Aaron?
Well, good afternoon. My name is Aaron Back. I'm retired from the North Carolina Highway Patrol. I'm sworn with North Carolina ALE still currently. I run a thing called the North Carolina Law Enforcement Assistance Program. In addition to that, I work with a new venture that we're doing with the state called the Responder Assistance Initiative. So I'm primarily going to talk about the Responder Assistance Initiative, and the reason why I was trying to sell off my slot was for a couple different reasons. One, I don't really fit into the exact mold of what it is that you're here to do. What I do and who I help are only first responders. And so there's a different and unique way that we have to go about doing it. But when speaking with Amanda and, of course, my other lovely board members that we're going to be up here, or panel members that we're going to be up here with, it's a way of you seeing a framework for what we had to do to attack a problem that we have. So there's a problem that we have in the first responder culture. There are more first responders who die by suicide each year than die by fatal assault or by accidents. So there's a problem. And the problem is this: nobody's going to help us the way that we can help us, but it's primarily because we don't trust them to. And so therefore it falls right back on us. So we had to come up with a very unique way of how do we approach this, how do we help people. And so I think that you'll see through all of the presentations of how it is that it's unique to us, but it can be expanded upon and used for others. So like I said, I'm a peer director and consultant with the state for the Responder Assistance Initiative. I was blessed enough during my career that one of the things I did as extra duties is I ran the peer team for the Highway Patrol. So I responded to all the critical incidents, all the line of duty deaths, all the things we had to do, all of our people who were in need that needed help. And so along with that, along came the way of the National Guard in North Carolina had a thing called the Integrated Behavioral Health System, which they have embedded clinicians for their service members who are returning back from overseas. And so they had a way of having culturally competent clinicians just to help them. And so the idea came that, hey, maybe this is something that we could expand to all state law enforcement officers, and that's exactly what we did. So I was asked to sit on a group to build this thing out, and through different processes, we wound up building this thing that was only available to state law enforcement officers and correction officers, which was great. And it was very successful. Because what we were doing as peers, we've been doing for over 30 years. And it works great because it's one-on-one. It's people that you can look eye to eye with, somebody that you work with, somebody who has done the job that you do and can say, hey, man, I've been there before, right? And so that was helpful. But about every 5%, every once in a while, we'd run into somebody that was above our level of care. And they needed more than what we could offer. So then we had to say, okay, well, how are we going to bring in culturally competent clinicians, not just a 1-800 number, not just something that we would give them as far as an EAP or something. It's somebody that I can say, hey, I need you to talk to Charles, but let me tell you who Charles is, and I trust Charles with my life. And so when you're able to have that type of communication with the employee, they're more willing to say, hey, you know what, I've never thought about getting help. I've never thought that I needed help. We're helpers, right? We don't need help, and that's what's killing most of us. And so once you're able to have that conversation and have that warm handoff, if you will, we had a ton of success. So we built this thing out, and through time and space and with legislature, one of the things that I had when they asked me to build this thing was a dream that it would not just be for state law enforcement officers. Maybe 5 years we'd get proof of life, and maybe after 10 years we'd be able to have it available to all first responders. Because in the nonprofit that I run, NC LEAP, we help all first responders, right? It's the North Carolina Law Enforcement Assistance Program, but we found out really quickly, we're not the only ones on scene. We're not the only ones responding to this stuff. We're not the only ones affected by this stuff. So now we just call it NC Elite. We don't say the long word because we don't want to scare off our fire friends, right? But so we've got RAI. Now we've got clinicians stationed across the state. I was blessed enough to hire every one of them. I know what their backgrounds are. I know where they come from. They were either first responders before, only worked with first responders, or came from the military working with military personnel. So that's the difference for us, is because not only is it, by the time you get a first responder to say, I need help, they're so far past help that you're in dire need. So you got one shot. You got one shot, because in our careers we think, man, there's a stigma attached to what we're doing. And we're not going to trust this thing because it can take my job, it can take my livelihood. And so we're very untrusting of stuff. And so it's very important that if I'm going to hand somebody off to somebody, I know exactly who they are. And I know exactly how they're going to help them. Because if that first responder goes to them and it's a bad experience, it's just going to live up to the stigma that we have created in this society about mental health, and they will never search for help again, right? So there's some of the stuff that I do. So our team with RAI, and it's built out of peers and clinicians, which is vital. And Charles and I were having a conversation, another conversation with this over lunch. It's very vital for our clinicians to have there's more than a casual relationship with our clinicians and our peers. Our peers are going to be the ones that we're going to be the ones that they come to saying they need something. We're going to be the eyes on the ground working with them every day, noticing when there's a shift, when there's a change in something that they need. We're going to be the ones that are going to be trying to convince them, hey, look, there's more that we can do. There's more that we can do. And then when we do hand them off to that clinician, like I told you, it's somebody I know. It's somebody I work with. It's somebody I trust. And I'm not calling them therapist. I'm calling them Charles. I'm calling them Amanda. And so those three. But we do have providers. They're licensed mental health providers. We do have a doctor. We have wellness coordinators. They have experience working with personnel. Like I told you, our peers, all of our peers come from the job, right? And most of us, it's because people either tried to kill us, or we had to kill other people, or we were involved in something, we've had losses. This career is not easy. If I just told you, if I had the ability to tell you of what I've had to help people with and debrief over the last 2 weeks, this is an insane world, right? And so there's more we're going to have to do. But it's not lost on me, because not just working with Amanda, but now I have friends who have retired who are working contracts and stuff with DOT, and they're calling me going, man, we got some guys in our district, we lost one. And I'm like, so, and I'll give you the example. Our motorist assist patrols, the guys that, they're really first on scene. They're seeing the stuff before we get there. What do they have for them? Now, I'll tell you, this is a great thing that we have built out for first responders. They don't fit into my category. So what are you doing to help them, right? One of the things that we talked about, again, and we talked about when we had our meeting is, man, how serious are we going to be about taking care of our people? Because that's really what it comes down to. How serious are we going to be about addressing this issue? What does it mean to you? Because I can tell you, it's not just retention, it's not just hiring, right? People don't come to these types of work for the money. You don't hire law enforcement officers for the money. They're coming for the cause. They stay because they feel like they're being taken care of and somebody's got their back. And so if you can build that culture, but it's gonna be hard. It wasn't easy for us. It's taken us 30 years to perfect this. But now we finally got people who know and understand that, you know what, if you're struggling, we'll take care of you. You're not gonna lose your job. You're not gonna lose your pension. You can still come, you're not gonna lose your position. You're not gonna lose your ability to be promoted. Because in reality, we want the best employees that we can have, right? So what are we gonna do to take care of them? How serious are we gonna be about it? So the services that we provide are at no cost. Obviously, we blessed again. We started out with a grant that we got through the governor's initiative, and then now we're embedded into the budget. So for a low cost, man, we provide these services. I only work part-time because I'm retired from the state. The other peers that come and help me, they volunteer to do what they do. So the main portion of our stuff is just our 18 embedded clinicians that we have to run the framework that we have. Eligibility, again, I told you, it started out, it was just, North Carolina Department of Public Safety employees, right? But now it's statewide. As of January 1st of this year, because of Secretary Buffalo and the governor's office, we are available to all first responders in the state of North Carolina. And you don't know what kind of blessing that is. I literally did a debriefing last night for a homicide and the effects of the people, that the first responders that had to, and the people that were struggling in that room. It gave me great comfort to not only go in there and spend 4 or 5 hours with them and work with them, but to be, hey, you know what? There's more that we can do. There's other resources. So for me, the pure work that I do is information, education, and resources, right? Whenever I meet somebody, it's information, education, and resources. But I don't want you to think that it's as easy as just hanging a placard in the break room beside the wage notification. It's more than a sign with a 800 number. It's our peers, our conversations, our trust that we built amongst each other. So really, if you look at all of the stuff that you'll hear me talking about today, it really boils back to leadership. How willing and how serious are we going to take about offering our people the resources that they need? Did you give me my 10-minute warning yet? Because I'll keep running. This is my personal cell number. And people go, man, you give out your personal cell number? I've had the same cell number for 22 years, and here's the reason why. I didn't believe in any of this stuff. I can still remember in '93 when they came around to our district offices and say, hey, if you ever need help, if you need to talk to somebody, let us know. And I thought, that'll never happen. It's not the way I was raised. It's not the way I was trained. It's not what I believed in. And even though I did have people try to kill me, and I was in situations where I was having to take somebody else's life. None of it happened. None of it worked out. But it doesn't take away those memories. It doesn't take what I saw. The death notifications, the bodies that I've had to deal with, all of that stuff just piled up, and I don't need it. I don't need it because I was looking at my coworkers. They look fine, so I must be fine, right? Let's go. There's more calls, right? There's more stuff to do. It doesn't matter if you're a first responder. This fits to within your career too, right? You got to keep going. You got to keep going. And so through that process, I thought, man, I'll never need it. I'll never need it. My niece was killed walking across the street in Williamsburg, Virginia. She was 8 years old. My brother was on duty at the time and responded to his own daughter's death. So what I had to learn to save my own flesh and blood, because unfortunately for my family, I'm a trooper. I know how to do funerals. I can do on-screen interviews, and I can throw parties if needed. But I did not know how to take care of my own family. I did what I thought was right. I made sure the funerals were good. I made sure the services were good. I did everything, and because I was thinking, this is what they need. But then when my brother couldn't get back in the game, and I'll ask you this, just to show you that there's not a whole lot of difference in what I do and what you do, right? You probably have an employee who's kind of disengaged, and they won't get back in the game. Something's a little off. He got to where he wasn't going to work. He was hiding from us. He was staying drunk. He wouldn't get back into the game. And at some point, I got a little frustrated because I'm thinking, man, look, it's horrible. It's sad. I'm sorry. But you got to get back at this thing called life. You got to get back in this game. I never understood exactly what he was going through. And if Benny were here with me, he would tell you this process saved his life because he was able to meet somebody. I was able to introduce him to somebody who looked him dead in the eye and said, you know what, my daughter was killed too. Let me tell you how I got out. But that's what it takes. And then so I started this journey of, man, trying to figure out how can we do this better? How can we do this better? Because out of all of the accomplishments that I've been able to do in my career, of all the rooms that I've been able to be in and all the people I've spoke to, I can tell you this. The most important thing that I'm doing with my life is what I'm doing right now. So the only thing I'm begging you is how serious are you about taking care of your people? Because the conversation starts here. You got to change a culture, but you can change a culture one person at a time. Does that make sense? Thank you for allowing me to be here. I'll shut up now.
So next we have Diane. And again, Diane is the Chief of Staff for the Governor's Office for New Jersey. And she was previously she got called the Secretary in New Jersey. She is the Commissioner of DOT in New Jersey.
Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon. I'm going to start out by saying it makes me really happy to see so many people in this room in this session. 9 times out of 10 when we come to these kinds of conferences, we want to talk about pavement and concrete and technology. That's all good stuff. It is phenomenal stuff, but I think it goes to what Aaron said, is taking care of your people is really your #1 job in leadership. And you don't design things anymore, you don't build things anymore, you take care of the people who do those things for you. So when Tanner asked me to speak, I was saying, well, you know, I am not a mental health professional, so what am I going to tell you? And I think what I'm going to tell you is the sum and substance of my career, probably dating back to 9/11, which was the first large crisis that was on my plate to deal with at the New Jersey Turnpike Authority, followed by COVID was big, but to be honest with you, I was saying to Peter earlier, the George Floyd murder was probably the most significant and most difficult crisis that brought stress to the New Jersey DOT, and how we dealt with those. And those are big things, right? Those are big outside forces. I think Aaron talked a lot about on-the-job forces, which we clearly see, and I really appreciate Aaron's view of that. So when I think about those activities in my career, those things, those events that have happened, that have called on me as a leader to respond, these are the categories I put them in. There they are, right? And you're gonna say, well, I kinda know this, and that's good if you do, but I want you to now, as you know it, in this room, in this hour and a half, really give it some thought. So changes in organizational structure and leadership. Great example. I just left New Jersey DOT. I walked across the street. I'm in the governor's office. I'm still within his arm's reach, and I put the most phenomenal person before the governor to be nominated to be my replacement because I knew he would be wonderful at taking care of his people. That was my only request of him. Take care of the people who work here. You got 18 months, sail this ship straight, keep these people where they need to be. Ask me how many phone calls I get. I don't know what's going on. There's so much change. Like, how could this be? I left you with this great person. That's my view of the world. That is not their view of the world. And so organizational change, changes in leadership structure can really shake a long-term state employee's perspective. We have civil service in New Jersey, so our employees have some level of job protection, but when things change, it means their behavior has to change. Their ability to openly communicate with leadership may change. It causes a lot of stress on your employees. Spent Sunday on the phone with one of them who said, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I said, how could that be? I've been gone 3 months. I mean, don't be silly. But it wasn't silly on her part. And she was really feeling that she was getting left behind and her work was getting left behind. So we have to really look at when we're changing our organizations, how is that going to impact and how do we present those changes? How do we tell people about changes that are occurring in the workplace? But the workplace is only one place that we have to look at when we think about an employee's mental health in the office, right? And so economic factors at work and at home. You see a budget that might be coming in a little tight, you start to hear about maybe reductions in force. That consumes people's attention and they begin to wonder about their own livelihood. They get concerned about, you know, how is this going to affect my department? So in New Jersey, we just reauthorized the Transportation Trust Fund a couple months ago. That created great peace at DOT. Why? Because they know for 5 years, their projects and salaries are fully funded, and they know for 5 years they're going to all keep working. A month before that, they were a little concerned. Their commissioner just left. They have a new commissioner. It's a tight budget year. And that the situation is being handled by leadership. Remain objective. What does that mean? It means you can't pick a side. So I was talking to Peter earlier. When George Floyd was murdered, it was such a horrific occurrence, and I had such a diverse group of employees. There was no way for me to not address it. There was no silence to be had. And my typical way of doing things would be to send an email to all DOT, and I'd be very careful in how I wrote it. But when it was George Floyd, I told everyone I was doing a part 1 and a part 2. And in part 1, I talked about George Floyd, what we had seen, the absolute inability for any of us to erase that image from our brains, and the fact that this is not something that should ever happen to anybody. And it was where I really learned what the expression Black Lives Matter meant, right? I knew they mattered. That was never a question in my mind, but it really crystallized that for me. And so I wrote an email to the team really talking about the absolute horror for George Floyd and his family, and how important it was for all of us to respect that with all of the employees we sit next to who will have very strong feelings about that. And it's okay to have strong feelings, that's what we do. And I got an email back from one of our employees who was so happy I wrote this email. This was the best thing she'd ever seen, and she was so happy that I said something, and that was great, until the next day, when I had to write the email that said, and we work next to law enforcement every day, and you cannot paint them with the same brush as that one officer or 2 or 4 officers. And she lost her mind. Then I got the email that I was a jerk, and she was quitting her job, and I said, okay, do you need a bag or a box? Like, how do I help you, right? Because I had to be objective. I couldn't take the side of one or the other because I lead the organization. I have to have the whole of the organization working. And so being objective when things go wrong, even if it's between 2 employees or a group of employees where they don't agree on something and they're getting a little heated, my job is to be objective. My job is not to say, well, I think those guys over there are right, because if I do that, I lose that side of the room. I can't, because again, as Aaron said, we gotta keep going. You can't do it. And you've gotta make sure the whole group understands that you understand both sides of the situation. You are the neutral party. And it's hard, because guess what? You have your own emotions, and you can't let your emotions go. You have to, in the office, you have to be the one to be leading the organization. And trust me, when you go home, make sure you're taking care of yourself, because it's very stressful and it's very exhausting. Making leadership available. I spent lots of time as commissioner walking the halls, not for any particular reason, just to make sure people saw me, and if they wanted to say something, I was easily accessible. My office was actually behind 2 swipe card doors. Like, if you wanted to get to me, good luck, because you had to get through the first one, and then you get through the second one, and there was a camera. And I hated it when I first got there. I said, why isn't the commissioner accessible? Well, then I realized, because you can't be accessible to everybody. It's not safe, right? And you have to, as the leader of an organization, it's not just you have to worry about, it's the people who are sitting in that office with you that could be part of something terrible. But being available, being seen, being amongst your employees. You know, I'm gonna refer to you a lot, Aaron, but when you go to a maintenance district, when you have had a crew that's gone out to a fatal accident and they are the first ones on the scene and have seen some things that I would hope I never see in my life, and I have never, as a leader of these organizations, reported to a crash scene. And it's not because I'm afraid or I don't want to say it, it's because I'd be in the way. I have no role there. My role is when they get back. When they're busy doing their thing, I stood back. But you need to be seen. You need to go out to that maintenance district. Don't just send the EAP. Don't just, don't send just, the manager. As the leader, you make yourself available. You talk to them. And I find that, and I'm looking at my friend Rosa, we all know, we all hug each other, right? That's not a big, you gotta ask these days if you can hug people, and that's fine. But some people really need it. Some people just need to feel that they can feel that you care about them. And it's not just you're passing through or you're on your way home and you stopped. You made a specific effort to be there with them. And then schedule employee convenings. We at DOT had something we called Coffee with the Commissioner. There was no agenda. I had nothing to say. It was really employees being able to come in twice a month. We rotated different groups through, and they would ask whatever they wanted to ask. If they wanted to ask about the budget, if they wanted to ask about, what are you doing about the trust fund? We have a vacancy at assistant commissioner. Are you gonna just pick a political person? Whatever their stress was, they could just lay it on the table. And it was, when they walked out, it all went away. And people really enjoyed them. And I would assume they're still doing them. I haven't spoken to the new commissioner because he's busy getting his feet under him, but he's very much a people person, and I can't imagine that he wouldn't continue that. But really, as leaders, and when I say leaders, you don't need to be the secretary of the commissioner. You can be the leader of a unit. You could be the leader of, your self-identified leader of a group that, your lunch buddies. Somebody takes responsibility. I always say leadership starts when you were probably in kindergarten and got to go get the milk wagon for snack, right? That was my my memory of leadership. And then some things that I have done. Timely emails, communication. One thing employees like the least, especially if it's a bad news piece, is reading about things happening in your organization in the paper. It's just not pleasant. Why didn't you tell them? Why are they the last to know? Why do their neighbors know before they do? We had an incident 2 weeks ago at the New Jersey Turnpike Authority where happens to be my former secretary of about 20 years took her life by jumping off one of our bridge structures. They haven't found her, so there's been no public notice of her passing because they haven't found her, and the state police will not tell us she passed away until they can find her remains. And it's been really hard not to say anything. What do you say? But people know she's not there. And the rumor mill has been all over because they had to tow her car off the bridge, and people know she's gone. And not talking about it up until this weekend seemed okay, and then all of a sudden it didn't. And so today, they talked about it in the easiest way and using the best words we could pick, and it wasn't easy. But communicating to people and letting them know at least the facts that you know is a key to reducing their stress. In-person availability. Activities that reduce stress and create calmness. We have therapy dogs at the New Jersey DOT. They come in twice a month, sometimes once a month, depending on schedules. And an employee can schedule a 15-minute slot to go hang out with the dogs in one of our auditorium rooms. We're very careful about people who have allergies. The dogs are kept contained. The room is cleaned very well after the dog's visit. But the difference in people's attitude walking into the room and seeing the big golden retriever jump up and want you to pet his head, and he wants to give you a kiss. People, their attitude changes immensely. I'd love to take their blood pressure from the moment they go in, and then I like to take it when they leave, because it has been so entirely successful that the employees now, like, they're out, are they gonna come more? And even in the governor's office, they say, well, if you would do that, you did that for them, will you do that over here for us? A little harder in the governor's office to bring in the 3 therapy dogs, but still something we're trying to figure out. And the last piece for me is follow-up. How many of you still keep a paper calendar somewhere, or really are good about, me too, really good about using the phone, the calendar on your phone? When you have an employee who's been in a situation, whatever it may be, they may have gone through a very bad divorce and they've come and they've confided in you, or they've lost someone in their family through a tragedy, or they've fallen on hard times because they have a child who is sick. Just make a note a week or 2 weeks from the last time you spoke to them to shoot them a quick email and say, hey, I'm just thinking about you. I just want you to know I know you're there, and if you need me, I'm here. And that one little note will spread like wildfire through your organization. Someone will say, so-and-so, they wrote me an email just to check on me. Because that's really what it's all about. And on LinkedIn, not long ago, it was actually the day before my secretary took her life. Simon Sinek, do you guys know who that is? He had a video on LinkedIn about a friend who was going through a really, really tough time. But he didn't know it. And he had gone over to her house for dinner, and they're talking, and she starts telling him about this really tough time. And he's like, well, why wouldn't you call me? Like, you're always there for me. Why wouldn't you reach out to me so I could be there for you? And she said, I did. And he said, really? Show me where. And he whips out his phone, and he's scrolling through the text messages, and they say, do you want to come over tonight? You doing anything today? She said, see? And he said, so I was supposed to take from, do you want to come over tonight, the fact that you were struggling mentally, you were having an issue, you were in a dark, bad place. I was supposed to take that from, do you want to come over tonight? Like he said, how would I know? And so they made a deal. And now, if she is having a difficult day, she texts him and says, I need 8 minutes, because there is some theory that says it takes 8 minutes to bring someone down from a tough spot to a more balanced spot. Not a perfect spot, but perhaps a calmer spot. And so now when she's not doing so well, or maybe he's having a tough day, they text each other. And at the end of the video, he says the most important line: everybody can give 8 minutes to a friend, even if you're in a meeting. And that is very true. So there's many things you can do. Most of them are quite practical. Most of them you do every day without realizing it. The goal for this presentation is to ask you to kind of normalize it into your work behavior. There's another person that I like to read his books. His name is Steve Farber. He wrote a book called Love is Just Damn Good Business. And it is about the idea that love belongs in the workplace. And he reminds all of us that you cannot, and no one does, take their heart out of their chest and put it in the car before they walk into work. Their heart travels with them, and that means with their heart travels their joy and their troubles. And so it is important for us, and I think most important because the world is insane, that it has gotten harder, that there is more of this, more of us recognizing what becomes a lack of stability for people, a fear that they have, this heavy burden that they carry. We see it more. I see it more with my children. I see it more with friends. And I think the idea of all of this is whether you're all human. So whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's in your place of worship, whether it's in your vocations, whether you play basketball 2 days a week with your buddies, is to try to make sure that you are observant for those things that may indicate to you that someone is in some distress. And remember, they don't take their heart out. They carry their joys and their burdens with them, whether they're in work with you or somewhere else with their family and friends. And if you just remember that part of your humanness, not only will you be phenomenal leaders, but I am pretty certain, at least in my world where I'm a God-fearing Christian, would tell you you are going straight up, because that is what we are called to do as human beings. And with that, that is my presentation. And I hope I made Tanner happy, because he really put a lot of pressure on me today.
Thank you, Diane. Next is Peter. Peter is the CEO of the Associate General Contractors of California.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Again, Peter Tatisci with the AGC of California. Very happy to be here, to be a part of this conversation. Always hard to follow Diane. She does a great job. So I'm here to kind of talk about the construction's viewpoint around this. I also want to talk a little bit about the whys that the contractor community is starting to play into mental health a bit more. And so for most of you, I'm assuming most everyone here is a transportation professional. You work with our types of members. So for those who don't know, AGC is the Associated General Contractors. We represent the commercial construction contractors who build transportation projects, bridges, ports, airports, what have you. And so our contractors, my contractors in California, are working for all of you, right? You're our clients, you're our owners, and we see you as someone who has, I'll say, a need for partnership in what we do. But our ask is that we need a partner with all of you in the conversation that I'd like to have with all of you around kind of mental health and its impact. So if you look across the country, the number one issue facing construction right now is its workforce shortage. If you talk to every AGC, every major contractor association in the country, the number one issue that contractors and industry are facing is this idea of we can't find enough workers to want to come into construction. And so when we think about that, there is we'll say a crisis around how we look at sustaining the future of construction. What I'm going to talk to you today are some of the reasons why we might have this crisis facing the workforce shortage, because there's really two crises in construction. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a story that happened a couple years ago. We were looking at trying to tackle this big issue of workforce development. How do we attract and retain workers within the construction industry? Why are we having this hard time getting people to pursue? So we did a number of focus groups up and down the state. And in two different focus groups, one in Northern California, one in Southern California, there were two different moms. And I'm going to summarize what basically they said, but it has stuck with me and is a mental image that's never going to leave me. So we were sitting there and talking about why they didn't want their kids to go into construction. And both of them basically said, I'd rather my kids go into the military because they'll have more career opportunities and they'll be safer than going into construction. So my wife went to West Point. She did 2 deployments in Iraq. I lived through the notion of having that doorbell or knock every single day while she was gone. And I'm sitting here listening to parents think, it would be safer for my kid to go to war than to go onto our job sites. And so that's something that we have to overcome when we think of public perceptions around us. But let's think then about these numbers, because I want you to know 2 numbers today. First one is 75%. The construction industry has the second highest suicide rate in the country. This is a crisis. 75% higher than the average nationally. Only the mining industry has a higher rate than construction. So we have a problem. This is a number that is out there, that is real, that is happening, that parents, the perceptions are receiving, that our people are experiencing every single day. And it's not something we talk about very often. So that's a problem. The second number I want you all to know is 23%. Basically, 1 in 4 people who overdose in any industry from an opioid addiction are a construction worker. So we have a problem. So when we think about why there might be safety issues, when we think about why people might be struggling to say, I want my kid to go into construction, 1 in 4 people have an opioid addiction or are dying from an overdose in construction right now. That's a problem. And it's leading then to these higher numbers of suicide. So we have to be addressing these things. So when we think about kind of the construction industry as a whole, we don't talk about these things. Why do we have this opioid crisis that's facing our industry? It's because at the end of the day, we are a tough industry. We do hard work, and we work hard and play hard mentality. And so we have a hard time, I'll say, accepting when there are challenges that are facing us physically. The other piece that I think is a huge part of this that we don't talk about enough is the fact that in construction, you either work or you don't. And if you don't work, you don't get paid. We don't have paid sick leave for the most part across the country. In the bids that you let out for our members to bid and work, you are asking them for the lowest bid possible. And right now, that means you are not bidding paid sick leave. And so when someone gets injured on the job site, if it's minor, they're going to self-medicate because they don't have time to go to the doctor and figure out what's really wrong. And so this is causing a huge part of our opioid crisis is self-medication because we are not putting that in. We are disincentivized as contractors to put that bid in because I can be Tatishi Contracting and I can say I'm going to give paid sick leave to my employees. I'm not going to win your projects because my bid is going to be higher than my competitor who's not. And so these are things that you all can think about when you're looking at the bids that you're releasing and letting, and asking the question, what do we want to be responsible for, and what do we want our contractors to be responsible for? It will cost you more. But the question is, one of those suicides, one of these major accidents because someone is coming high on opioids to the job site, is that more later than if we just put that in the bid earlier? So things that we as an industry, that means owners, that means contractors need to be thinking on, and this is why we talk about we need partners with our owners, because we can't right now just change the game. It's not possible, because there are those who are not wanting to change the game. The most important thing most of the time when we talk about a project is it was on time, under or on budget, not what was our fatality rate. What was the human component? Yeah, we want low safety, right? Like we talk about that. We have changed our culture in safety in the construction industry over the last 30 years. We have made that a priority. Most workers will talk to you about their IIPPs. None of them will talk about their EPAs, right? Or EAPs, excuse me. They do not know those. because we don't talk about those things. Those things are not part of what is mandated in our cultures. So at AGC of California, what we've been doing with our members is really challenging them to think about what can we do to start changing, one, the stigma that is within our industry, and two, what are things that we can control and start making happening. So I guess 2 years ago in 2021, we launched our mental health stand-down initiative. So we all know that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so we launched this in conjunction with Safety Week. So all of us, for the most part, if we do anything in construction, know that the first week of May is Safety Week. It's National Safety Week. We prioritize every single day. So we saw that as a really cool opportunity to say, hey, let's continue that safety conversation. In week 2, launching this idea of mental health. Mental health is a part of your safety, right? There's physical and emotional safety, and we have to focus on both. So we worked with Secretary Walsh from the Biden administration, who helped us. He's a person in recovery, and he talked, as Secretary of Labor, helped us put together a video to talk about why we need, as an industry, to talk more about this. And we developed a toolkit and safety manual for having mental health stand-downs. And so we've encouraged all of our members across the state. Year 1, we got Caltrans to participate in this, shut down their job sites for Friday, and had a stand-down. We do these for safety all the time. We do these for different topics. We've not done one for mental health. So we're doing these now. And so this is our 3rd year. We just, last Friday, were at the Los Angeles Chargers training facility with PCL Construction, and we held a stand-down there for 150 workers. And we're encouraging all of our members to do this across the state. And we'd ask all of you to also encourage that to be happening during May, because every day they have a tailgate talk on safety. They start their day with that conversation around why their physical safety matters. It is not hard to add in to that safety conversation a bit on mental health and your emotional safety and why that matters. And so we need to normalize this. We need to give permission to our contractors and to our workers, more importantly, that they can talk about this, that our industry is not just a rough and tumble industry where we have no feelings. We are people. And there are examples where people are struggling, and it doesn't always have to be with their own personal, it can be a family dynamic, but their performance is impacted. Their safety is in jeopardy. Their physical safety is in jeopardy when their emotional safety is not strong. Is a big one of them, because we are suffering a crisis. Again, 75% higher than the average rate. 23% of all opioid overdoses are a construction worker. Just know that, because that is your job site everywhere in the country. And we want to do better. We have to do better as an industry. So that is kind of my presentation on things that we can be doing. And it really just comes down to partnership and giving permission to have the conversation on our job sites. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And our final presenter is Charles. He is the Director of Strategy and Planning for the Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Use Services for North Carolina DHHS. That's quite a title, Charles.
It is a mouthful.
Put it on your business card.
Yeah, it barely fits. So, hi, folks. I have the great fortune of being last, but I know we want 30 minutes for conversation, right? And I also have probably the longest PowerPoint. So I'm going to improvise a little bit, and I'm going to encourage, maybe we can distribute this PowerPoint. There's a Awesome. There's so much happening at the Department of Health and Human Services right now. We could talk for an hour and a half about the stuff we're doing in mental health, and so I wanted to equip people with information so that you could get in touch with us. You'd know how to connect with us so that we can talk about it. So this is going to be a little abbreviated. I just want to start by saying thank you to all my fellow presenters. I've noticed a few themes today. There's been a lot of courage on stage. It is not always easy to be honest about problems that we would rather not look at. And people have been courageous in their honesty about very real problems today. And people have been compassionate and gracious in the recognition that it is good and right and wise to care about people as people, the whole person. And so just really I'm so honored to be here, part of this panel. Thank you to the wisdom of NCDOT organizing it. The time has come to get very serious about mental health. So this is a basic point to that end. Mental health is health. Health is about the whole person. We are much more accustomed to thinking about physical health. This is the real health, right? This is what actually counts as health. This is what we know how to treat. Mental health, we're not so sure about it. There is a lot of stigma. There is a lot of belief in the world that mental health or substance use is a moral failing. It is not. Stigma kills. We all have mental health. We are not minds and bodies. We are one thing, and we have to treat the whole person. So a commonly cited statistic is that 1 in 5 people across the country, it's true in North Carolina too, will experience a mental health issue in any given year. That's more than 2 million North Carolinians. It's also true that 5 out of 5 folks have mental health. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. This is just a reality. It's a part of what it is to be human. The COVID-19 pandemic taught us a lot about mental health. We experienced isolation in ways that many of us never had before on a scale that was inconceivable to us at other points in time. And so at the Department of Health and Human Services, we were seeing long-standing challenges in mental health, in substance use, exacerbated by COVID-19. And so we wanted a way to talk about what are some things that we can do as individuals in our organization, working together. This is a stressful time for folks in the Department of Health and Human Services. This is a stressful time for healthcare workers. How can we talk about some basic things that folks can do to take care of their own mental health and to look out for one another's mental health? And so we came up with this acronym so that people could get the scoop on managing stress. S is for staying connected to family and friends. We know that those connections build resilience. The C is for compassion for yourself and for others. Self-compassion decreases our stress and it creates room for connection with ourselves and with other people. Observing your use of substances. It is very normal, very common for people of all kinds to self-medicate in all sorts of ways. Bring some attention to that. Bring some mindfulness to that. Pay attention to what you're putting in your body. The other O is that it's okay to ask for help. Struggling is normal. Asking for help is empowering. We know how to treat mental health and substance use. We have methods that work. And then the P is physical activity. It improves your mood. It supports overall health. And so the scoop here are some basic things that I hope you all can take with you today to keep in mind for yourself, for the people that you work with, for your loved ones. It worked really well for us during the COVID pandemic. Here's another way of providing some frameworks for thinking about our own mental health. The first part of this presentation is really, what are some tools that y'all can use as individuals that you can bring back to your organizations to create a framework, some vocabulary, some frames of reference for how folks are doing. So this is the stress continuum model. If you go to this site down here, it's part of a stress first aid training, and this gives you 4 categories to think about the impact of stress in your life. And this first one, this is the ready category. It's green. This is where we all want to be. This is optimal functioning here. You're at your best. You're in control. You're feeling fit physically, mentally, spiritually. You're motivated, you're mission focused, you're behaving ethically, you may even be having fun. Like, this is a good place to be. This is where we want to be. Yellow is reacting. I think this is maybe where many of us find ourselves in stressful work environments. And this is where there's some mild or transient distress. Times are tough, it was a rough week. Oh my gosh, I can't believe my calendar today. This is it's lower risk, but there's some distress happening. And you might feel irritable, you might lack a little bit of motivation, loss of focus, etc. These first two categories, these are really things where we think leaders, effective leadership, can really help us manage, when we're in that yellow zone, when we're reacting. As we move further down the spectrum into orange and into red, those are areas where it might be time to think about, like, okay, how do I maybe seek some professional help? So with orange, there's injury. Injury has happened because of chronic, severe stress, maybe an acute event. This is where there's something more severe, something more persistent. It leaves a scar. There are some causes, maybe your life has been under threat. We certainly have many people in certain professions who have to endure a level of stress that is very extraordinary in its degree and in its kind. And so for certain workers, it is especially difficult because you have to live in a certain space of stress because of the nature of what you do. So in the orange category, there might be some more loss of control, panic, rage, depression, excessive guilt, etc. In the red category, this is someone who's sick. This is someone who needs some professional help, and this might be PTSD, depression, anxiety, substance misuse. The reason to put this up here is just to offer it as a framework for you as an individual, for your teams. It gives some language for checking in. Where do you find yourself today? And wherever you find yourself is okay. No one needs to, if you're in the red category, we're not asking for a disclosure here, but we're inviting a chance to take your reality seriously, because that's one of the ways of recognizing that people have a heart that they bring with them to their workplace. So these are just sort of two frameworks that I hope can help people think about, what can we do as individuals? How can we think about this? And then, all right, I'm going to be real quick. We got Mental Health Awareness Month this month. Next month is Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Awareness Month. So check it out. This is some information if you're curious about that stress first aid model. There are trainings and resources that you can find there. So you should be seeing content, I don't know, social media. It's like an awareness month every other day. But I have found it very helpful to follow some of these awareness months. All right, we know the need. We have a crisis across the country in mental health. We have a crisis in North Carolina. These are some statistics to that effect. I'm not going to linger here, but basically between 2019 and 2023, rates of depression and anxiety almost quadrupled. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for children aged 10 to 18. Our young people are hurting. People are hurting across the lifespan. So this is some data. We have tons and tons and tons of data to this effect. I think we all in our lived experience also know that something's different in our experience of the world right now, post-COVID. All right, so here's some of the good news. This is going to be rapid fire because we need to chat. But there's lots of opportunity to talk more about this. North Carolina is making massive, massive changes for the better. So we are investing in the whole person. We've expanded Medicaid. This is huge. It is probably the single most significant thing we could do for the behavioral health of North Carolinians is expanding Medicaid. We also have a historic investment in behavioral health. There was a $1.6 billion signing bonus from the federal government for expanding Medicaid. More than half of that was invested in behavioral health in North Carolina. And we are hard at work to figure out what are the most effective ways to use those dollars. And as you go through the slide deck, you can see some opportunities to get connected and learn more about how we're doing that work. And this is just for vocabulary. Behavioral health, it's kind of a jargony term, but it means mental health and substance use health. It's sort of like, we got physical health, we all know what that means. Behavioral health is more encompassing mental health, substance use, that's what I mean. Okay, more than 450,000 people now have comprehensive health insurance thanks to Medicaid expansion. It launched on December 1st of 2023. We thought it was going to take us 2 years to reach 600,000 people enrolled. We are, 6 months in, and we are way past half of that. So this is an incredible accomplishment. It is such a good thing. There's some stats here for folks who want to learn a little bit more, but we're just so glad that Medicaid expansion has come to the state. These are some examples of the services. Behavioral health. It's a part of health. So we want to intervene. We want to get people health care so that people don't get as sick, and we can avoid crisis. We can get upstream of all of this stuff. And if you want to learn more, if you want to figure out like how do people apply, people can apply online. It's become very easy. You can go to that link and learn more. And then most of those eligible for Medicaid expansion work in critical service industry jobs. So there's a really important connection to caring for our workforce here as well. So it's a smart investment in so many ways. Okay, and then we have this historic investment in behavioral health. We not only did we expand Medicaid, but we raised the rates, the reimbursement rates for behavioral health services. They hadn't been raised in more than a decade. And so now we can bring more providers into the system so that we have more people to provide the care that we need. I was going to linger in the crisis system here because we got $131 million over 2 years to strengthen the crisis system, but I have to go really rapid fire. So this is the slide that I want to spend the most time with. This is our vision for how we move North Carolina from crisis to care, and this is a continuum. So this is how we want our crisis system to work. You need someone to call when you are in crisis. You need someone who can respond to you when you are in that crisis. And then you need somewhere to go to get the right care at the right time. And it cannot always be the emergency department. We have to have other better options for care that are more appropriate to behavioral health needs. So this is a little bit of description underneath for what we mean. Like how many people, we all know about an urgent care. We go to urgent care for our physical health. There are things called behavioral health urgent cares, and not a lot of people know about them. We are making huge investments. We recently invested, how much was it? I think it was $15 million, and we expanded our capacity to provide behavioral health urgent care by nearly 50% across the state. So this is the continuum we're building. I will linger in someone to call space. You've seen a lot about 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, 24/7, 365. You can call, you can text, you can go online and chat. We have services specific to certain populations, so Spanish language services. We have a line for veterans, and then we have a line for LGBTQ youth. We can also, in North Carolina, we can refer you to what we call the peer warm line. So if you're someone who is experiencing a behavioral health need and you're not really sure where to go, and it would help to talk to somebody, and it would really help to talk to somebody who gets it, who might have a level of credibility that comes from lived experience, well, you can do that now. 988 can refer you to the statewide peer warm line, or you can call this number, 1-855-PEERS-NC, anytime to speak to a peer who is living in recovery. What is a peer? A peer is someone who is living in recovery from mental illness or a substance use disorder. And so these are folks who are incredible resources because of the expertise of their lived experience and because they've navigated the system of care. And so if you just want someone to talk to, you can do that anywhere in the state. You can call our peer warm line. We're really proud of that. It launched in February of this past year. So these are ways we're investing in someone to call. I think out of respect to our discussion, I need to wrap things up, but I'm going to flip through just really quickly. This is more information about that continuum, so somewhere to go, investing in facilities across the state to build our capacity to provide care. We are doing a lot of community engagement as we think through how to spend this historic investment in behavioral health. There are lots of advisory committees, and if you get in touch, those advisory committees are open. We're taking a big tent approach, and so if you want to participate or you want to just kind of tune in and listen, you'd be welcome to. Here's some more. This is just like a sample of press releases we've done. in the last 9 months. It's a lot. The point is, like, Google NCDHHS press releases. There's a filtering tool if you want to look for things that are specific to mental health. There's a lot that's happening, and we want people to know about it. Okay, we do a monthly webinar. My division with the incredibly long name, DMHDDSUS. Each month we do a webinar open to the public. This is where we talk about current events, updates, but it's also where we platform some of our policy ideas and communicate with the public about them. Sign up for newsletters, blah, blah. You can find all this stuff. Find us on social media, and that's me. Sorry to be so rapid fire, but I want to make sure that we have time to talk.
So our panelists are going to come up to the table, and we're going to do a couple of questions. I'm just going to highlight some of the ones. A lot of the information they covered kind of relates back to some of the questions we already had. So I'm going to try to hit a couple of the ones that we maybe didn't talk about as much, and then give you guys a chance to ask some questions. So the first question is, how can employers create a supportive and inclusive work environment that prioritizes emotional well-being of their workforce? And just throw it out there to any of the panelists that would like to address it. He didn't want to be first, but now he's like, hey, I'm ready.
Well, I mean, so one of the things that we had to do is we had to, this theory that you start from top down and bottom up, really to get buy-in, we had to have people that trust the process and understand what it is that we were trying to do. We had people that were truly in need, and we had to embrace them. And so it really is a leadership issue. I keep coming back to leadership, but it is simply that. We had to have employees who were struggling step forward and say, I need help. And then they came back with examples, and they created the culture where once we saw them come back to the workforce and they were healthy and they were able to be productive employees, then people started trusting, hey, they're serious about trying to help us.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, are they on? Maybe not, maybe? Is it on? Okay, great. I think one thing I would say, it's not easy, and I think, Charles alluded to it earlier. If you're in a workplace and you have the opportunity with, again, leadership at any level is leadership, it's a stretch, but tell your own story, right? Telling your own story takes down a lot of barriers for people when they realize that you are simply as human as they are. I've done it. The first time I did it was incredibly uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, I realized that it helped other people to understand that, I could be your boss, but I'm also just a person. I've read a lot lately on professional isolation, where people feel, that they become isolated in the workplace for a number of reasons. When you are expressive and when you're not afraid to share, and you don't have to share every detail, you just need to let people know you understand them, and I think it goes a lot to what Charles said about lived experience. People are more likely to engage and at some level ask for help from you because they don't feel stigmatized by the fact that they're asking for help in that part of health we choose to ignore most of the time.
I'll chime in. We work differently than we did before the pandemic, at least I do. There are a lot of benefits to hybrid work. I don't think I'm alone in having days where, I'm not sure that there's a bathroom break built into the schedule. There's a different quality of attention that happens when we are physically in a space together. And so being mindful of that massive change in the way that many of us work, and thinking about the fact that, actually, if we're in a hybrid work environment, there are forms of connection that are more challenging than they otherwise would have been. And so how do we create some space so that there can be other ways of connecting even when it is in a hybrid environment. So can we build in a 15-minute like water cooler moment? Like, it sounds a little bit silly, but we are trying to build in those kinds of moments where you remember that you're a human creature and you are not simply an email machine. For those of us who work a lot in the email space, it is so easy for mood to escalate, for stress to escalate when there aren't any natural breaks over the course of a workday. So just creating some space to like breathe, check in with yourself, keep a reasonable sense of the scope of what you can actually do with the very finite resource of time, and that we have to claim some of that back for ourselves.
So those are all great points, and I do think the technology is definitely a blessing and a curse, because it's much harder to step away now than it was even 15 years ago, when everybody didn't have work cell phones and email, and you weren't always accessible. So can you talk about how you feel like employers can foster open communication channels that allow the employees to express their concerns and seek support?
I think we've covered a lot of it. Open communication is again, we talk a lot about safe space. You know, when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, we talk about creating safe spaces for people. It all pertains just the same way to mental health and behavioral health issues. And so I think as an employer, you know, creating, whether it's activities or opportunities for people to gather, and, you know, could be any number of I call them clubs or activity groups. We have, you know, at New Jersey DOT, we have cultural heritage groups that, like right now, we're an Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and so they're going to be doing a big program, and they get to kind of come together. It has nothing to do with work. And they enjoy each other's company, and they kind of are able to let down a little, but also just creating time for gatherings where people see each other again as something other than an engineer, an accountant, and a human resources professional. You know, we don't want to say too much in front of the HR people, because, you know, they may write it down and it might wind up in my folder. I mean, I like to say that as if I was kidding, but you know I'm not. People get concerned, and you have to create that safe space for them. And one thing that I think Charles brought up is we've lost the art of small talk. When you start a meeting, to ask somebody, how are you? How's your family? And how many people do you think they whip out their phone and they're showing you their dog? And that's great, right? I do it. I show everybody my dog. People show their grandchildren or their kids, or, oh, look, you know, I just planted this beautiful garden. And it eases a conversation and continues to create that humanness that I think people need. We had a situation at our office yesterday. For some reason, it was like 55 degrees and they couldn't turn the air conditioner off. We spent $300 million to renovate a building, and we are all freezing. And so, of course, I had a couple people, and I'm at the airport, and they're like calling me going, well, my folks want to go home. Okay, because they're really cold. Okay, I put newspaper over my vents. I mean, like, there's ways to deal with it, but we are in a very different time. It's not like when I was starting and they just said, put your head down and do your work and put a coat on, you'll be fine. That doesn't work anymore. Just doesn't. And that's okay that it doesn't. So I said, well, if they want to go home, they can, but they have to work from home. They can't just go home because it's cold here. We now have learned in COVID, everybody can work from home. So you don't get the day off. You get to go home with your laptop and your work, and you need to be accessible. And that's the balance, right? So you create the space where people can voice their concerns. You may not always be able to address them. You may not always be qualified to address them, but you don't pass judgment. I had one woman going, absolutely not. No one's going home. I'm like, okay, bring it down. Bring it down. It's okay if they go home, but really creating that balance and creating that opportunity for them to feel that you are as human as they are. I think that's the most important thing an employer can do, and any member of the employer's leadership team or staff.
And I don't want to cut you guys off, because I'm sure you all have great insight to that question. but we only have about 5 minutes for audience questions because we want to make sure that you get your bathroom break between this and the next session. So anyone in the audience have questions for the panel members? All right, let's start with Joanna. Okay.
I'll ask everybody. How have you all, gosh, I have 18, so write it down. How has each organization, except Aaron, because you've already answered this, gone about making sure that employees actually accept, Diane, because you answered too. How do you go about making sure that employees feel heard and feel seen, especially since the pandemic and there have been so many losses since then? What are you all doing as an organization or as leaders in your respective areas to make sure your employees know that they matter?
You took away my ability to go first.
Now he doesn't feel seen or heard.
I feel heard.
It,
No,
I'm happy to jump in. We do some of the same things that Diane described. So our director hosts like office hours, or like there's open office hours so people can come and talk to her about anything and everything, no agenda. There's also like a monthly breakfast. So like, let's all get on screen with our coffee and just kind of hang out together. So we have those sorts of opportunities. I often open meetings with an invitation for people to share something that's going on in their life. Like, what's something that happened this weekend that felt good? Like small things. I'm we'll see how it goes. I'm even experimenting, you could sort of guess, this might be my sort of style, with like some quiet meditation to open a call. Like, not a guided one, but just like, let's just take, we're all here, like, if you need to go to the other room for 5 minutes, like, let's just take a few minutes to actually like breathe. Let's transition into this meeting in a slower way. And then let's do a check-in. We've done check-ins. How are you entering this space? Like, what are you carrying with you as you enter this space? And you know, it's not happening as consistently as I would like, but things that sort of interrupt some of the forces of habit that affect all of us, and make us maybe single-minded about efficiency, about the next email, about whatever has to happen next. Just trying to interrupt that a little bit here and there.
So I would just add that what we're encouraging our contractors especially to do on job sites is that kind of daily incorporation of mindfulness to the tailgate talks, right? Where they start pretty much every morning on the job site, all huddled together in teams, and incorporating that language in so that there is a space for people to potentially, ask for help, not necessarily in that group setting, but knowing that they can come back. I think a job site is one of the hardest places to do that because we're not, I'll say, privy to always the private moments. We're not in an office setting where we can go and close a door and have that sense of confidentiality or even confidence. So where we have those moments on job sites really do come down to those kind of, when do we start that conversation as a team collectively? How do we then put into action, I'll say, the words and the vernacular that drives then that culture there? And those are the pieces where, as an industry, construction has to do better, moving beyond checking a box to say we did this morning, to no, the words matter. And how we follow through to those words makes the difference in driving real culture. So that is going to be a challenge that all construction industry is going to be faced with, but that is something that we have to lean into as contractors.
And Diane and Aaron, please feel free to chime in if you have something that wasn't covered in your say no.
No, for me, to me, it's a little bit more primitive. It's stuff that we learned in high school, right? It's Maslow's basic needs, right?
Right.
Food, water, shelter, and safety. Until they feel safe, you're not going to get them. You're never going to be able to lead them. You're never going to be able to do anything with them until they feel safe. And once they feel safe, then you got to know their strengths, weaknesses, wants, and desires. If you don't know that, then you're not leading them. You just happen to be in the same room. And once people feel safe, then they're approachable. And so, again, that's a leadership model. That's something I believe in. And again, not to push the area if you're trying to make it easier, not trying to push a particular thing, but has anybody ever taken the DISC model, the DISC model for leadership? So the thing that was most powerful about that with my employees and when I had them was that we all had the opportunity to show, hey man, this is who I am. And you might guess that I'm a D, right? So I'm very direct, I go at them, I'm hard with them. But it was important for me to understand that my S's, the 50% of society, the people that I depend on the most to get the work done, they are intimidated by me and my actions and the way that I sometimes lead and talk throws them off. And so it doesn't mean that I need to change. It needs to mean I need to recognize that sometimes what I do may be throwing you off, not making you feel safe. So therefore, and once everybody sort of understood how my leadership style affected other people, how we were able to communicate more effectively, then they were like, man, I really appreciate you doing that because sometimes you do, right? And then they're eligible or able or more comfortable to say, I'm not good, right? But until you can get to that point, you can't do it. Fair enough?
So unfortunately, we do not have time for any additional questions. I'm very sorry, but we're going to send out the slides and information to everyone. So I'm sure that the panel members would not mind if you reach out to them, since they did provide their contact information in their presentations, and ask any additional questions you guys may have. So I'm going to turn it back over to Brad Lale, our board member, to.
Hey, sir, if you'll stay, I'll answer your question when we're done.
Yeah, I was gonna actually put them on the spot, Amanda, and ask them if folks had some questions. Maybe y'all could hang around and visit. I think that'd be great. This has been an incredibly powerful presentation, much more so than I thought coming in. I feel kind of like lucky that I was called in last minute to do this. This has been wonderful, and I appreciate the work that all of y'all do. I appreciate you bringing up the word courage, because I think each of you have has demonstrated courage in working in this area, which is clearly not for the faint of heart, to put it mildly. So how about another round of applause for Tanner? And let's give a round of applause to Tanner and Amanda, our NCDOT staff. From here, we go to the general session, which I think begins at 3:30. So yeah, we've got about 30 minutes for that bathroom break. Small talk, check in with people. All right, take care.